very happy to, Madam Mayor. Yeah.
Madam Chair, would you like me to bring one of the safety auditors up as well? So we engage independent people to make sure that any recommendations to council, we've got the best people in the country, pretty much who have advised us on this. So perhaps Mike, if you'd like to come up, we've got Dr. Shane Turner there as well if we need any further queries. But Mike has been providing input into the major cycle routes throughout the city, and he's one of the auditors that we've used. We have a panel of 3, so he is one of those, and he's the person who's probably been the most involved in this.
You've talked about the entrance. What about the exit? Because as I understand it, it's then the bus's obligation to give way to the cyclist and the pedestrian.
Yes. The buses on exiting onto Chewham Street would be required to yield to pedestrians and pedal cyclists travelling along there. That's a more intuitive movement for bus drivers. It's a simple give way onto there. But because of the Chewham Street works that before council this morning and the introduction of the separated cycleway there, the visibility between that exit point and approaching cyclists is actually very good as far as the design is concerned there. So we're very confident that works in a very intuitive way and is a far simpler manoeuvre in fact for any buses exiting from a normal bus stop anywhere in the city where a cyclist is coming along on their right hand side. So bus drivers are used to looking right for pedal cyclists, and that's all that they're obliged to do with that. Yeah,
but they'll have to look left for pedestrians as well.
Yes, on that exit point. Yeah,
but so in order for someone to be hit, the pedestrian or the cyclist would have to ignore a stop signal.
The interchange entry.
On the entrance, and a driver would have to ignore the obligation to give way on the exit. Okay. Paul, then Jamie.
Just in terms of the previous interchange that was going to be built where the Justice Precinct was, the buses were going to disappear under the underpass and go underneath. Have you thought about the same sort of concept for the cyclists? An underpass going underneath the entry and the exit, so in other words they disappear under the road, so there's no need for any conflict whatsoever.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we have looked at that in some detail. It was one of the spokes recommendations as to how we might ameliorate these concerns in delivering a grade separated facility effectively, some form of underpass. I think our preference for that would be, if such a facility were possible, would be for it to be shared between cyclists and pedestrians. Otherwise, you get only half the benefits of it. The key problems with it are actually the scale and the size of the facility that we would need. To deliver a grade separated facility of that sort, for a pedal cyclist to be able to use it, would need at least a 2.5 metre headroom for them to come underneath, as with any underpass. And so with the buses would be travelling over the top to get into the interchange, and we've got to get down the depth of the bridge effectively over it, and then another 2.5. So we're looking at about a 4 metre cut to get down to the grade there. We then have an issue with grades. This city is being designed to be barrier-free for people with mobility impairments and for cyclists to be able to make legible, easy journeys. Now, there are crime and prevention issues with underpasses. People don't like them. And so in order to deliver something that actually offers clear view through people will not use an underpass if they cannot see the way out. And so most of the advice we have before us, to achieve that, we would need no more than a 1 in 20 ramp. So it's a very gentle ramp down so you can see right through to the other side, and it would need to be about 4 metres wide, the cut, to deliver that. That takes the ramp, the entry to the ramp, the western side of Colombo Street, because this is about 40 metres in from Colombo Street intersection where buses turn into the interchange. So to deliver that safe ramp, we've got to come the other side of Colombo Street, and therefore that immediately removes the potential for pedestrians and pedal cyclists approaching this crossing from Colombo Street to be able to use the facility, because the entrance is out on the western side of Colombo Street. There are a number of constructional and cost implications, of course, of it, but in principle, those are the key reasons why that actually would be extremely difficult, complex, and probably not that great a solution, because it just doesn't deal with everyone. So our fear with that is that there would be a number of cyclists and pedestrians who would still need some form of at-grade crossing facility. So it's unfortunately not a solution that we've really genuinely got available to us.
Jamie?
Yeah, I've got two there. One was sort of the convex of that, and could you not have a pedestrian and cycle bridge that goes over? But I guess it's the same thing. when you talk about
The same gradient
Yeah.
issues, unfortunately, apply.
But then, considering the government, own that entire frame, surely, they could take that into account, perhaps move down the bus exchange slightly east to mean that the entranceway onto Chewham was further down, so that grade then didn't go to the west side of Colombo. But I don't look again. It all seems quite difficult. What about then? This is again perhaps another sort of left field, easily quashable one. But why not just have? And I get frustrated with seeing everything crammed into one street. There's a perfect place for pedestrians, the perfect place for bikes, the perfect place for buses. Oh, and then there's cars in there too. Why not just have a great cycleway on the northern side of St Asaph Street?
Yep, good question.
And a council had looked at putting a temporary transitional cycleway on the northern side of St Asaph Street as part of some of the interim transitional city works that were going in 2012. We actually thought that might not be a bad idea to put a contraflow cycle lane eastbound along St Asaph Street. That again went through a similar safety auditing process because of the nature of the change involved there. That raised a number of significant and serious safety concerns at the time. As part of this recent process, when Ableys were engaged to look at us for us at various options there, St Asaph Street and some form of contraflow facility was in fact a locus of that study work from Abley, and you'll see in the papers today a summary of that. The challenge with it is contraflow facilities work pretty well when they're not very long and they don't have too many access ways crossing them. It's just the sheer length of that facility there that we would be expecting cyclists effectively to travel the length of St Asaph Street on a contraflow facility. So we and Environment Canterbury representatives considering those options reluctantly agreed that St Asaph Street wouldn't offer a material benefit over the Chewham Street proposal. So I suppose that that actually is one of the things that the recent Abley report has reconfirmed for us, and that was that we really are only realistically looking at options using Chewham Street for an eastbound facility, albeit reluctantly.
Vicky?
Is coming in and out of the bus exchange. So the figure from the Margaret Baisley was 50 buses going in and 50 buses coming out every hour. Are those figures correct?
I think our estimates are, and this is post the full hubs and spokes network being in place. Yes, I think our figures are, and I think our interchange design project manager is here, but I think I'm right in saying that it's somewhere between 36 and 50 buses entering per hour when hubs and spokes is in place, and and a similar number exiting, but of course there is the Lichfield Street entry as well. So not all of the buses are entering and leaving via Chewham Street. Some are via Lichfield Street, but I think the numbers are somewhere in the region of 70 to 100 per hour on the Chewham Street
Right.
side.
So just in terms of the logistics, so the bus driver comes out, and then there's pedestrians going both ways and cyclists going one way?
Yes.
And they're coming in and out sort of 1 or 2 a minute, perhaps? Between 1 and 2
A
a minute?
maximum of 2 buses in a signal cycle, and that is, as councillors can see in the diagram, that's one of the reasons that the left-turn bus lane has been added there, is that the buses move into that left-turn lane, and although they have green entry to the interchange, and effectively they've been on a green wave all the way from the super stop at the hospital, so for the most part buses will be able to make an unencumbered journey through the central city and into the interchange. So what that actually means is that the amount of time in any given signal cycle, given that there's 1, perhaps 2 buses entering in a cycle, is that a fair proportion of that signal cycle will remain a green signal to cyclists and pedestrians. So we're not expecting anywhere near as many hold-ups for them there as we would have done, for instance, with the Southside facility.
So just looking at the options on Chewham Street of the north side or the south side, because I'm just thinking of the bus driver sitting on this side of the bus trying to see cyclists some of whom will inevitably race the lights or whatever, and it's just complete human nature. And I recall the issues with the previous bus exchange, particularly with pedestrians, particularly with small pedestrians. And this actually, the more I think about it, just in terms of those numbers, I actually find quite scary. So I'm just thinking about the other side. What's the worst that happens on the south frame, apart from the non-intuitive, where you're not expecting cyclists?
Just
Well, that's
one.
when cyclists are most at risk. If they're not,
One-
if they're not, that's as I understood what you said. Then further down the route.
There are a number of issues which Dr. Turner can probably add to, but the other...
Just in terms of the numbers, Madam Chair, Brendan Bisley, who's project manager for the interchanges, informed me that the maximum is likely to be 35 in, 35 out, or 35, 36 type thing. 50 is an upper number.
Right.
So that's where we're looking to head.
There's no more than 1 bus in each signal cycle.
How long is the signal phase?
Most of them are about 80 seconds in the central city when we keep the phasing simple.
Doesn't work.
So 1, perhaps 2.
I think one of the key things also, Madam Chair, is the fact that while there is a signalised stop control, we're also looking at other mitigation methods as well. And those are slightly raising the ramp going up, LEDs in the ground itself, and potentially audio. So this, and Mike can probably explain this far better than me, this is really something that can be considered similar to any other normal intersection around Christchurch, and it has that degree of control. That's the comparison that one would make, isn't it?
Yeah. Madam Chair, councillors, this intersection, one of the key things in doing the road safety audit of this intersection was looking at what are the controls that were put in place or proposed. And one of the things as auditors we look at is how does that interact with the whole of the proposed project. Just as a little bit of background, I'm the team lead for the audits, road safety audits for TP 1B, 3, 4 and 9 to 11. So we had the same team involved on what would be the contiguous route along Chewham Street. For this interchange, as Richard has mentioned, that there are some key things that are very similar to treating the bus interchange access as an intersection. There are also some key things which make it a little bit more improved than a normal intersection, and that is that typically at an intersection, a right turn vehicle or a left turn vehicle would have to give way to pedestrians crossing across that through road. In the latest design that we've seen and audited is that there's a clear separation between the turn movement and the pedestrian and the cycle movement. Now that's not typical at an intersection, it's actually an improvement. So what we're doing is looking at restricting the pedestrian movement and the cycle movement from that turn movement. So we're separating that element which would normally occur at a conventional intersection.
Sorry, can I just have the answer to the other part of the question? So what's the worst that happens on the south side?
Well, the cumulative risk on the south side is, and Dr. Turner's worked on this for us, with the expected number of access ways along there. I mean, this is one of the big problems of the number of access ways that might cross a separated facility. We believe the south side overall, in terms of crash risk for pedal cyclists, is between 56 and 114% higher on the south side of Chewham Street than this north side, and that does not take account of these mitigation factors which Mike's just summarised around the interchange access itself. So the crash risks overall and safety risks overall are markedly higher on the south side. The other complicating factor on the south side, which does also affect turning buses, is the ahead cycle movement eastbound when cyclists get to Manchester Street. Because as buses exit the interchange here onto Chewham Street, if they want to travel west again, they will go east along Chewham, turn right onto Manchester Street. With the arrangements at the moment, they get a dedicated green wave through there, and then they come back along St Asaph Street for the buses to then travel west again. So that's how they exit the interchange. So the problem there then is buses would have a cyclist coming eastbound on the right-hand side along approaching the Manchester Street intersection. So there are concerns there for bus-cycle conflict instead at the Manchester Street, Chewham Street intersection. So that is a balancing factor also. And so, but overall, the issue is the complication of the non-intuitive movements that we're expecting inexperienced cyclists to make when they get to those intersections along the southern side, particularly for that small number that may wish to turn left.
Why can't you put a barrier arm down at the entrance?
We've considered that, and Mike here has safety audited a number of options for that. And it was a perfectly fair suggestion, and we have fully looked at it. The problem with it actually is that it overly complicates the whole arrangement again. But the real issue is what happens if they don't work properly. And some concerns there were around visually impaired pedestrians, people with mobility impairments, and so there are some genuine concerns about barriers potentially trapping people
on the wrong side.
On the wrong side of the barrier. And so that's why the audit team explored that fully, and we came at that with a very open mind. If we could have made barriers work there, and we genuinely believed it would be better, then we would be proposing barriers to you today.
Except that doesn't sound right. So, I mean, just thinking it through, getting trapped on the wrong side means that they have entered the danger area after the barrier has come down, which means they must be in full view of the bus. So I wonder whether there's a signalling thing that you could do, that if somebody were on the wrong side of the barrier, that it could signal it to the bus. You know, I mean, are we actually without the wit to resolve this?
Madam Chair, when we looked at the issue of the barriers, as Tim mentioned earlier, there's an issue of cycle time, and cycle as in the traffic signals. So there's going to be a lag time for these barriers to come down. One of the issues that we considered as road safety auditors is what happens if the system does fail? Does it fail safe up, or does it fail safe down? If it fails safe down, it stops everything, and all pedestrian movements, all cycle movements will stop, even though they may be permitted to do, in which case we would possibly end up with an unsafe movement of people trying to get round the barriers. If they fail up, and that is the barriers aren't there, then there's nothing there. People would take the perception with time that the barriers are there to protect me, and if they fail safe up, then they would perceive that the barrier is not down, so therefore I'm safe. Much along the lines of people with at railway crossings. If the barrier
what is our experience of railway crossings? How often do those barrier arms fail?
I don't have that information, sorry. I'm not sure of the mechanisms with Kiwi Rail as to how their systems fail safe. Do they fail safe up or down?
Yeah.
One of the other things too is that because of the width of the crossing, especially with our mobility impaired and our elderly, they may actually enter the system with the barrier up, but be part way across when the barriers come down. And often with the elderly in that, it's that point of indecision where they get into the system and the barriers have come down in front of them and they all do I turn around and go back. Yes, an observant bus driver will notice that they're in the system and take due care. But likewise, separating out the through movements and the turn movements is very similar to the controls and the regulatory requirements that we have now at intersections, and that is that if you're on a red light, all things being good, you would stop. But we're also in a situation where, with the latest design, is that the cyclist and the pedestrians are advanced ahead of the first bus driver. So the bus driver can actually see people ahead of them at that crossing point. So if somebody does violate, they are aware that somebody's in that system.
See, the one thing that's counterintuitive that you're doing is to give a turning vehicle a priority into over and above cyclists and pedestrians turning into a building. Normally, if you're turning, it's giving them a sort of a green arrow, as it were, which gives them priority over pedestrians. And so, no, actually, even on roads, they don't have priority over pedestrians, do they?
No.
The way the signals are going to be staggered will be such that the actual buses will get there before, and so it's all about a key portion of the design is ensuring that the signalisation of this works so that we don't have those potential conflict points occurring.
But if the buses are coming so infrequently, couldn't you stop the bus and make sure the way was clear and then turn?
In a way, Madam Chair, that's how we would, with a signalled arrangement such as this, be able to modify the level of priority offered or otherwise. So one of the advantages of that dedicated left-turn bus lane there is that it does, if we did need to stop buses occasionally to enable cycles and pedestrians to cross over there's enough space in that left-turn bus lane, being that currently it's sort of 3 buses long there, certainly 2 with some other amendments we're looking at, but at least 2 buses could sit there anyway. The issue there is it's a fine balance. Environment Canterbury very much welcome the left-turn bus lane into there, and they very much welcome the idea of buses having priority entering the interchange, notwithstanding their concerns over safety. So this arrangement does give us opportunities to monitor how this works and to balance the priorities between cycle, pedestrian movements and buses there. The other thing we're looking at in terms of a modification to the artist's impression you have before you there is we are also re-looking at whether we pull that stop line for the bus back there and advance the cycle box more, so that as a bus is coming from, bearing in mind they've only just come through a set of traffic signals 40 metres away.
Yes, but they'll always be green for a bus.
Yeah, but actually the bus driver will know if we have the cycle stop line there, but the bus stop line is further back, they'll actually know whether a cyclist has already and a pedestrian have already come to a halt before they start to make their left turn.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sort of dominating. Yanni.
Thank you. I'm glad you've said it's just an artist's impression of the new bus interchange. It doesn't look particularly pleasant. Hopefully it'll be refined. Yeah, it looks like a prison, yeah. It's just that, I guess the issue, the question I really want to understand is the overall traffic modelling, because, if you think about the city, there's an accident or there's construction, and suddenly buses back up, and then you get this kind of, we saw it with the central city before the earthquake, with some of the roadworks and things that would happen is buses will speed to get through red lights. It happens quite frequently if you observe, because they're on the schedule. So they're on a schedule. And so this is all quite technical and, timing and stuff. But in reality, things don't work that way. And, this morning there's a whole bunch of letters to the editor about how late people were because waiting for a bus. So if you get a congestion of buses in this area, what happens? Which inevitably you will get.
Through you, Madam Chair, the bus interchange design team have used some live dynamic traffic modelling from a company called Oricon, who've actually worked out all of the bus arrival and departures within the overall signal phasing arrangements for the adjacent intersections, and there's a whole approaches to that. And Paul McNow at Red Bus has seen those for himself. The way the interchange is being designed and the way these signals around it are being designed is that we've looked ahead, as with all of the other projects, to 2031. This is the traffic levels in the central city with everything in place, all of the anchor projects notionally in place for the central city, and at morning and afternoon peak periods. And in bus interchange terms, the afternoon peak tends to be quite critical. And we've also doubled from what we expect, and we've just discussed, as being the bus arrival and departure rates from this interchange with the hubs and spokes network in place. They actually, because we had concerns ourselves about just the very issue you've raised, Councillor, and that is, will this thing work smoothly, and does the interchange itself work actually with the surrounding sets of signals, assuming this cycle lane in place and these signalisation arrangements as we're showing them. What they've done is they've actually taken those flows for 2031 and with the figures we've already suggested, and they ran them through. There are no bus congestion problems in the system at all, but just to test the immediate area around the interchange, they actually doubled the arrival and departure rates of buses from what we would reasonably expect to be the case under any circumstances, and with 2031 traffic flows in place. And again, they have confirmed that there are no anticipated congestion or delay problems at that horizon year. Now, obviously,
like Colombo Street, I guess I was interested that Colombo Street doesn't get blocked off by buses trying to turn or cross. Several other questions. One is, what happens to cyclists who want to go east to west? Where do they go?